Wi-Fi 6. So what we really wanted to talk about today with our team is really what is Wi-Fi 6? Why does the new standard matter? At a real briefly, I mean it delivers a whole lot of things that we'd expect with new wireless standard. More bandwidth, more throughput. Okay, yeah, every wireless standard delivers that. More efficient RF transmissions. Yeah, most of them have really delivered a lot of that, but I think we're going to see that there's a lot more benefits to what Wi-Fi 6 is doing from an evolution perspective. Um, Improved battery use for clients, for phones, for wireless or other wireless devices, PCs, IoT devices. That's a big advancement. Increased capacity for channel reuse. So that's we'll get into that in a lot more detail. But what we can actually do is have APs actually have less opportunity to have co-channel interference. So you can put them together without having them step on client communications. That's all good. And in the end, the big difference that I think the previous standards have really never addressed well is predictable latency. And we're going to get into a little bit of why that, or how that's actually delivered. So this is a slide from Cisco Connect 2019. This is actually a comparison of 11N, 11AC, and 11AX. What you're actually seeing is the differences in latency as you increase the number of users on an AP. As you increase the number of users, the throughput for AC and N drops pretty dramatically. That's that slide on the right. The delay that is shown on the left-hand side actually shows that as users increase, the latency increases dramatically. You have the 99th percentiles and the 90th percentiles for N, for AC, and AX. What's really showing is that how tight the 99th percentile and the 90th percentile is for the new Wi-Fi 6 11AX standard. You can see that there's big differences between AC at 90% and AC at 99%. There's significant increases as users increase. But what you see with AC is that you have a linear increase for latency. That is really going to deliver a lot of value for voice communications as well as for bandwidth, or for just clients communicating on the network. There's a handful of new technologies that are included with Wi-Fi 6. This is not a full listing of all of them. We're going to talk about 4 of the majors, but there are some other things like longer symbols and like QAM 128 that allow more bandwidth or more things to be sent at one time. But we're really going to focus on OFDMA for spatial reuse and BSS coloring, target wait time, and multiple users, multiple input, multiple output, or MU-MIMO. These are some of the fundamental changes that are in the Wi-Fi 6 standard that are really going to deliver a lot of value to the clients to our clients as they actually deploy this out in their environments. So with that, I'm going to hand this over to Joe to talk a little bit about OFDMA, orthogonal frequency division multiple access.
Say that 5 times, Jeff.
No, I can't do it.
Thank you, Jeff. So in today's world, before Wi-Fi 6, basically you have one client device communicating. He has a delay to make sure his channel is clear to communicate, and then he sends his transmission, and then the next client has to wait, a pause, and then can start transmitting. With Wi-Fi 6, instead of the one lane road that have had all this time, basically you have multiple lanes. So if you get behind a slow-moving client, if we use the highway example, you get behind a bicycle, that's as fast as you're going, right? No matter you're driving your Lamborghini or your Tesla, you're stuck at the speed of the person in front of you. With OFDMA Wi-Fi 6, it creates multiple lanes so that if you're slow, you can get into your own segment, your own section of the bandwidth, and basically pass another client. So there's multiple clients able to communicate at the same time, and so you have more efficient transmission as you have more clients transmitting at the same time.
And I think that's interesting. Like the way that we do things with OFDM with the AAC standard, to your point, like we're all on a common media, right? And we got a 20 megahertz channel, or we got a 40 or an 80 megahertz channel. If there's one client talking, everybody else has got to wait for everything to clear up. When they implemented OFDMA, they added the idea of resource units into that 20 megahertz channel, right? And that's how you're talking about having those clients talk at the same time, because clients are waiting to get access to a 2 megahertz channel inside of that their own lane, right? And if they're sending a lot, they might grab a couple of those 2 megahertz channels. It's interesting to see how different that really is, because just having, 8 clients talking at the same time, that's crazy. We can't do that today. Those 8 clients at that point aren't fighting for the same. They're not. You have less interrupts in that space, I would imagine.
Yes, you have. So there's less time waiting for the channel to be clear because there's less clients on that individual subchannel or RU. So it's much more efficient. You're able to serve a lot more clients. For small packets, you don't have the overhead and the latency of waiting for this, the clear time for a small packet to go through. Or if you are transferring files or have a lot more larger data, you're able to get your own RU channel and not hinder anyone else. So, there's improved data transmission. You have more devices talking at the same time, better latency, and better communication between the access point and multiple devices at the same time.
And I'm kind of curious. I know that both you and Ed have been digging into this a bit as well. Like we just have a picture of a 20 megahertz frequency here, but with OFDM, with Wi-Fi, with the previous versions, we started bonding things together into 40 megahertz, 80 megahertz, 160 megahertz channels, potentially, for performance. How does that work with OFDMA?
My take is that it just provides for more channel space to be subdivided, more communication to happen.
So even with 40 megahertz, you could still
you could even just keep chopping it up. So
you can either have more channels of this size, or you double the base channel. Then you can either have more channels or bigger subchannels.
Oh, so
flexibility.
So you might have,
comes down to.
Yeah, you could have a client that has a 2 megahertz channel, or an 4 megahertz channel, or an 8 megahertz channel, and
Right.
then it just gets spread out over that whole frequency range. That's interesting. I think that out. It also is like. No, go ahead, Ed.
So at the core of this too, is just from like a selling point, this is referred to as the core technology, and the one that is most often referenced whenever people start talking Wi-Fi 6. It's the premier thing. So, and to my knowledge, it's the only piece of as far as these 4 quadrants are concerned, that's guaranteed to be rolled out and is priority for wave 1 of the AX, the waves, which is interesting. Some of the other stuff might potentially fall to the wayside, but it's yet to be confirmed. But this is it's a key selling point, so to speak.
So from a channel planning perspective, do we still do things, from what you've read, we still manage things the same way? We're still doing cells that are 20 megahertz channels, or 40 megahertz channels. Is that's still that piece is still the same? We're not doing cells that are 2 megahertz, right?
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Is there anything else anybody wants to add about what they've been thinking about with what they've read for OFDMA, and how it's going to deliver any changes to what we're doing today?
No, as far as the technology itself is concerned, it's just remarkable. I mean, what you're going from an AC to AX, it's night and day.
Yeah, I think the flexibility is what jumps out at me here. And I think that's kind of been the bane of wireless up till now, where AX is kind of doubling down how to fix things within wireless within the parameters that are already established, which is interesting. And instead of trying to think of ways to even push things further, I think it's a cleanup effort. It seems to me, which is good. I think it's relevant here because my read on wireless has always been up till now where it was something that was driven by technology, but somewhat turned into a Frankenstein's monster over the years. It really wasn't tight, but it was still used, right? So now it's being used more and more, and there's an obvious effort toward tightening it up as a whole. And you could see that here with the flexibility of this for you to be able to kind of look at these 20 megahertz frequencies because it was rigid, right? You had 20, 40, 80, that type of thing. That's relatively rigid as far as establishing highways for that. Now you can have multiple points of data flow within those highways, right? Where it's almost like overlaying an additional highway with different lanes. Um, you know, over the same structure, over the same physical parameters, right? So it's all about flexibility, the way I see it, which is cool.
When I was reading through this, there was a comparison that just jumped out to me. You know, when we talked about Wi-Fi 5 back, you know, AC prior, you know, we're really talking about one common medium, like one channel that everybody's talking on, right? You know,
Right.
OFDMA with multiple clients talking at the same time, it's almost like the evolution from going from hubs to switches. It's not that depth, you know, that in depth, but you know, because you're talking in 2 megahertz channels, you know, you could, or two or four, you know, these little chunks, you can have multiple clients talking at the same time. You know, that sort of evolution that we saw when we went from switches to hubs allowed us to really have much better control over the wired side of the network. I, I I'm hoping that we see out of OFDMA is getting a lot of the same predictability and performance with OFDMA that we saw when we moved away from common media on the wired side and moved into more of a switched environment.
Yeah, I think that's
That's a
a
good
real good
comment.
analogy.
Yeah, same.